Have you ever wondered how dangerous a corporatocracy would really be, especially as we seem to be gradually, slowly but surely crawling ourselves into one? As technology continues to grow and expand at an exponential rate, have you begun to fear the power of the unchecked mega-rich developing technologies that the laws in our government are years behind being able to properly regulate? I mean, this isn't even science fiction. That's the world we're facing right now. And the show Pantheon just decided to tick the technological abilities up a couple of notches and tell a story that feels disturbingly possible and real. Because Pantheon is a near-reality sci-fi show about billionaires who believe they have discovered how to fix most of the world's problems by uploading consciousness, and no matter what concerns are raised, no matter what crimes are committed, the ends for their goal will justify the means. What is the cost of possibly a few million lives when you're talking about saving billions, trillions, and providing essentially immortality?
This will be bigger than the Industrial Revolution. The UIs will transform business, medicine, construction. Once they are running things, humans can kick back. This will birth a massive retirement industry for the young, which will have its own opportunities. The market for new products and services is endless.
Now, before we get into the wider story of Pantheon and talk about why I think this show is genuinely a masterpiece, I want to make it clear that it's also a complete story. Unfortunately, due to real-world corporate BS, a lot of people think Pantheon was canceled after season 1 and there was no season 2. Frustratingly, there is a season 2, but you can't watch it. Why? Well, it was like 90%
finished
originally when the show got canceled, but eventually they decided to polish it up and put it out exclusively on Amazon Prime New Zealand and Australia. Why? I have absolutely no idea. So when I'm talking about season 2 of Pantheon, I want you to know I did not pirate it, even though legally, I couldn't watch it to be informed for my job, and instead, I just sent my clone, Green Daniel, down to New Zealand to live with our favorite Kiwi Tim Hickson for a few days so that he could watch the show legally, and that's how I'm able to talk about Pantheon Season 2. And no other reason. Here, you want proof? Here's proof.
Green Daniel, yes, of course, here he is, in New Zealand, wonderful New Zealand, just over there. And don't look over there though, keep focused on me.
But dead seriously, the show is complete. Season 2 is out and it tells a full story. This is essentially a 2-season miniseries planned out and executed to near perfection that I absolutely believe you should watch. And if you are willing to go for less legal means, Season 2 is available if you look for it, though I would never encourage you to pirate something, even though because of dumb corporate BS, it is now literally illegal for you to watch it anywhere, no matter how much this art impacted you in Season 1. The corporate gods have decided no. But okay, what is actually the plot of Pantheon? For this review, I'm going to get into initiating incidents in just the first episodes. I think that is fair game for a review, because I don't think that's like full-on spoilers. It's just the hooks that are meant to make you want to watch the rest of the show. But in a broad sense, as I already established, the macro-level conflict for Pantheon revolves around the fact, the reality we are all in right now, that the mega-rich are able to just place technology into society regardless of the ramifications, essentially unchecked, because the mega rich, despite us living in a democracy theoretically, are still able to just make vast sweeping changes that affect everybody. We are in the middle of this right now with AI. But what if instead it was UI? Uploaded intelligence.
What's uploaded intelligence?
It's the process of uploading human minds to a computer.
So that someone can live as a machine?
Not as a machine,
in a machine. Your mind would be the same. It would just exist electronically rather than organically.
And brilliantly, from a writing perspective, Pantheon does not present uploaded intelligence inherently like a negative thing. It's a tool, just like AI, as we are dealing with right now, is a tool. And it's a matter of how it's implemented and controlled and who controls it that makes the possibilities, the actual results of this technology being publicly available, dangerous, possibly disastrous. And with this being a story by Ken Liu, a author slash writer I have fallen in love with recent weeks because I'm also in the middle of reading his Dandelion Dynasty epic fantasy, which will be getting a dedicated video of its own. Like and subscribe to check that on out. But this conflict bleeds down slowly to the family level, where we meet our initiating main character, Maddie, a high school girl who is being bullied in her day-to-day life and is also grieving the passing of her father. But one day she begins receiving messages through emojis in a chat log on her computer, and this person seems to be very technologically capable, hint, hint, and takes revenge on many of her bullies for her. And if you've been paying attention or seen any promotional material for the show, or are really just capable of putting 1 and 2 together, yes, this is her dead father's consciousness uploaded, because it turns out her dad worked for, let's call it like the stand-in for just like Amazon, Apple, all these different stuff put together company, and as he was dying, he agreed to have his consciousness uploaded, except his family was told it didn't work. That was a lie.
I lied.
This is found out because Maddie's mother, Ellen, who also kind of becomes a central main character and is personally my favorite, probably the most right character I have come across in recent memory of television, sees that her daughter, teenage daughter, is chatting with a stranger online and goes, no, who dat? But through a series of emojis that communicates a poem that only Ellen and her husband David shared privately, she is able to confirm that this is his consciousness been successfully uploaded. So she runs off to immediately make a call.
Kick your ass right here, right now.
Hey, did you just threaten my daughter? Who the hell are you?
Let me go.
Shut up. If you touch her again, I will kick your ass, and I will gladly suffer the consequence.
And I will rain down on a godly fucking firestorm upon you. You're gonna have to call the fucking United Nations and get a fucking binding resolution to keep me from fucking destroying.
That, though, is not the only hook that Pantheon successfully lands into its audience, because in the first episode, we are also introduced to a savant hacker-type character named Caspian. And Caspian has some horribly abusive, awful parents where the father is demeaning to him and his wife, just a general piece of shit. Except, it seems that his parents aren't really his parents and instead are paid actors who are abusing him for some mysterious reason. And this kid is being set up from literally birth. We see them later on taking like baby videos with him to be something special, but he has no idea.
Yeah, right. Like he has a shot with that. You okay? I didn't mean to push that hard.
That hard? That wasn't hard enough. Next time, don't pull your punches.
I can't really say anything about Caspian's storyline without getting into spoilers, so all I will say here is this show could also be looked at as like a genuinely good drama and kind of a thriller too. There's a bunch of different like subgenres permeating throughout this because it's just a good human story, and our lives tend to bounce around between genres a little bit. The only thing I would say it is not is a comedy. Not many ha-has to be had. Combine this with extremely believable characters, excellently modern written dialogue that does not feel cringy, and what you end up with in this pilot is a cast of characters that you immediately feel extremely connected to, despite what seems to be some like bigger than normal level conflict clearly brewing. And from this first episode, Pantheon, in just 2 seasons of 16 episodes total, manages to communicate some sublime commentary on not only the real world, but its themes and insights into what it means to be human, what it would potentially mean to be a UI, because this show does not strip UIs of its humanity, while making it abundantly clear they are not human.
I can't think in executable code.
Use your imagination.
I can't.
Then die!
This is not some like surface level we live in a society bullshit. And in fact, Pantheon clearly, deliberately, as time moves on throughout the show, leans into the fact that uploaded intelligence, as its perception of time, control, reality, differs from our own, would lose parts of its humanity. But does that mean we should value it less? As UI becomes its own society, its own group of individuals, well, peace between us and them relies on humanity being comfortable with something living parallel to it that it does not fully understand. I'm sure that'll go over swimmingly.
I was being sarcastic.
And of course, because of these initiating development of these UIs being through for-profit companies, we have also as humanity found ways to take something that should just be a revolution and decided to invent a way to make UI's life a living hell for profit because upward bar go brr that good. And caught up in this wide maelstrom of conflict and ideas is Maddie, her father David, and mother Ellen, along with Caspian, who discovers essentially most of his life has been a lie and he must struggle to find his own place and purpose as a crafted and manufactured chosen one, because these corporations, well, that's when we get into corporate cults. Something that, again, feels like somehow Pantheon just looked at like the real world and decided to turn the notch just one, maybe two, because we're nearly there, right? We already know that there are Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk fanboys who just defend any action they take because progress, good, upward line go, capitalistic worship. All Pantheon does is take that idea and turn it into what we already in some ways could be calling it, a corporate cult. The worship of products or innovation, all for the sake of the capitalistic gods.
And I'm sure you've been sick of this question for at least a decade.
What would Steve say? No, I'm not sick of the question. We ask it every day.
Still?
Still and always.
Okay, well.
But throughout both seasons, this is kept so well grounded because the core reason everything happens, why the narrative moves forward, disaster and salvation occurs, because all UIs would be are flawed people with even more increased power. So what becomes a good UI versus a bad UI?
The only good
UI.
is a dead
UI.
Is it even truly the same person who is uploaded, or because their memories, relationships can be manipulated or even restarted from one? It's not though, right? So if Maddie's meeting her father, well, she's grieving, so of course she immediately buys into him. But Ellen, she's taken 2 years to get over her husband.
Our daughter's become quite the chef.
Thanks, Dad. Have a seat.
Maddie, can I talk to you?
That's disturbing. And there are disturbing scenes where we see the difference, but again, Pantheon does not take this the predictable, easy way, where you're just gonna see like, yes, father evil, bad now. And instead, it's about the realization of what is still left that is human and what is the difference that makes him not.
Dad uploaded himself and now he's back.
He's not back. I was there when he died.
And if you're sitting there going, that sounds familiar, yes, this is a similar theme to the one that was core to the center of dark matter, except Pantheon handles it 10,000 times better and actually provides enough answers to make it feel cathartic and not just like a narrative mess and disaster. I didn't like that book. And I just wanted to say that, yes, Pantheon's sub-theme of handling this idea has more nuance and thought put into it than this entire book. Shame. But a key part of this story working is because the UIs are kept feeling human, despite them evolving to the point where they do feel like Dr. Manhattan's gods with their conflicts. There is still simple moral conundrums that no matter how supremely intelligent you become, there's no right or wrong answer to. For example, if you are a UI made by a government and you suddenly see how much power you have and are being kept secret from the public, should you come forward and let people know what's going on, what's living right under their noses? Especially if you know there are other UIs out there that are bad actors. And it's just such a solid, concrete example of how even the biggest conflicts in writing, the stuff that just feels like it should be wildly out of the ballpark of something that is relatable, if you write it correctly, remember to craft your characters carefully, can still feel oh so relatable and grounded for us, the reader or watcher consumer. And if at this point you're thinking, Daniel, this stream of consciousness, I don't feel that conflicted. Of course a UI would be a person, and I would respect that. What if the UIs start making intelligence of their own? What if they fully create a consciousness purely in the digital space and wants you to consider it a citizen, wants you to actually value its voice and opinion. In fact, what if it's crafted from thought patterns from a person you know close to you, one of your relatives? Is it then one of your family members that never lived in the physical world? Because it's just as intelligent as this UI. Should it vote?
No, absolutely not.
All of this to just solidly say, this is science fiction. This is incredibly well-written science fiction of the modern era that has learned from the mistakes of the classics in the past, but also stayed rooted in the truly captivating elements of what made this genre great. Start with what is real, exaggerate a bit, and then theorize. Figure with your audience. Keep it human, write it better than many of the greats did, and you end up with...
I can see you. I can feel.
God, something I would call a modern masterpiece of science fiction, which takes me to a rather frustrating part of this review. It's an animated show, so even though we live in the day and age where a lot of people understand that Ghibli puts out some of the best movies you can consume, so many have seen the highs that Arcane or something like that can reach, it still has a bit of snobbery towards it. Regardless, though, this should be seen as one of the 10 best sci-fi shows of the last 10 years, but it's not brought up in those conversations. One, because the marketing around it, especially season 2, got completely screwed, but two, it was on AMC+, though season 1 is now on Netflix, and so it didn't catch on to get that gargantuan audience, and instead has had to rely on this word of mouth that I'm hoping to increase here to share a show that is really special. But if all that highbrow doesn't catch you on, let me also make you aware of the fact that this show is badass. From a displaying hacking perspective, I believe Pantheon actually makes the right call and justifies its creative liberties within the context of the show. Because you will hear, like, you know, the internet wired whatever interview with a hacking specialist, them say like, yeah, the movie Hackers doesn't display hacking accurately. Yeah, I know there's dragons in this world, but I gotta let you know, as a historian major in horse stirrups, I can tell you that this horse stirrup wouldn't have been around until the 1555 fives. And this is, what year is it in the dragon world? It's only year 85. Who fucking cares? I'm sorry, as someone who worked as a software engineer, if you display hacking accurately 90% of the time, it is the most boring, why would you show that realistically thing you can put in a show or movie? Not always. There have, of course, been great examples, but especially for a show that's choosing the medium of animation, be creative as long as it is serving the purpose of communicating what you are doing in the story with technology clearly to the audience. Even as a former engineer, I do not care. Tell good stories as long as the ideas behind them are based in reality. You can take creative liberties with how it's conveyed. That's fine. It's aesthetics. That being said, there's the additional benefit that Pantheon, within its medium, takes great effort to actually justify showing not only references to other badass sci-fi, but also showing like, oh, hacking is occurring this way because you're watching a UI in its own constructed world demonstrate to people who are in its environment how it is doing something. And then it takes it even further for like when a UI has a fight with another UI, the show gets to go, well, they're still human with imagination, so everyone essentially becomes Dr. Manhattan, and that's how they fight. And with the animation style chosen, it ends up feeling a lot like the Justice League Ultimate show, but like when it was peak. And on an aesthetics level, it's also like a much more constrained cyberpunk story, not only because of its general philosophy towards like tech giants, humanity, the dystopia we're barreling towards without the cool aesthetics, but it leans into that in a more like Her fashion, where it's about love, it's about companionship, the evolution of humanity, and what technology can do once it outgrows us, with a little bit of like Inception style storytelling with how it also plays with time. Which takes me to how all of these ideas are further played with in season 2. And remember, I did not watch season 2, Green Daniel did. Please keep that in mind. Obviously, we as a society would probably not handle the events of season 1 very well, because, keeping it spoiler-free, the conflicts don't always go in the great direction. It's not a happy fun time. This is cyberpunk. That's how the genre goes. And as I've said before, I'm partial to like stories that show our characters literally aging and growing up. It's just a feature of storytelling I typically enjoy, and that occurs in Pantheon as well, where we jump forward and see a bit more of the dystopia that has been created, the cyber demons that have been crafted in response to UIs existing amongst us. Because one thing we do know about humanity for sure, if you push us to an extreme, we will. And throughout season 2, not only on a societal level are we seeing shifts and changes, but with our own grown-up versions of characters like Maddie, there is a new mentality where the dark matter theme from before, is this really the person you knew and loved, is expounded upon and taken to new extremes. Is it right or wrong to resurrect the dead? Is there the death of the idea of a generation? What does that mean to grow up with your great-great-great-great-great-great-grandmother still able to communicate and judge you? Does that hinder progress? All of which is addressed, answered when it's appropriate, or left up to interpretation before coming to a cathartic ending. I cannot stress enough, Pantheon is a finished story and narrative, and there's probably a surprising number of people in my audience who have watched Pantheon Season 1 who didn't even know Season 2 is out and available, and the last thing they heard is that it was canceled, which is a damn shame. I am genuinely upset that this art piece that has so much to say and does it so well from one of the best creative minds in the science fiction fantasy space got screwed over by the very same people it is criticizing. Corporate conglomerates who are getting closer and closer to having the authority of governments. All I will say is personally, I believe art should be available for all. I'm okay with it being behind a minor paywall because that's how we fund and do things. But if something is just arbitrarily region restricted or taken away from possibly being consumed in any legal means by those who could learn from or be affected by the art piece, well, I'll just say, solve your own problem. Have your own clone go to New Zealand to live with Hello Future Me, aka Tim. He'll let you, it's fine. This has been just like a rave positive review. There are a couple nitpick criticisms I do have of Pantheon as a whole. There's some conflicts, not on the grander level, but just between characters that can feel a little manufactured at time, but not by any egregious means whatsoever. And it handles romance with the subtlety of, I would say, Robert Jordan, where it's just like, these characters need to kiss now to establish yep, they kiss. Romance. But at the end of the day, it's a sci-fi story, and it's trying to communicate on that broader, beyond word level, the implications, the reality around us through exaggerated storytelling, which is why I think even the title of the show, Pantheon, is brilliant. The characters we're meeting are a part of said pantheon, and in hindsight, many moments of the show feel earth-shatteringly epic, despite them being so small when you first come across them. Like watching the world forever change, all because a father sent his daughter a message from beyond the grave. I will say though, earlier you saw me reference in the editing, there's very obvious references to other science fiction in this show. Specifically, Ghost in the Shell is referenced, I think, 4 different times I caught, and for good reason. Show your influences, that's great. Though the ending starts going a bit from oh, this is a reference to very much so pulling from some of its influences to tie everything up, and in a way, though, that still felt relatable despite it merging into referencing one of the most high-concept sci-fi things I can think of. So it almost felt like flexing on us and being like, yeah, we know we can reference that, which is pretty human and not super high distant concept, but we can also reference this, which is brain-hurty sci-fi, and both work here. And then before we leave the spoiler-free section behind us in the dusk, I would like to say I've seen the animation for this show hyped up a ton, and there are certainly some visually interesting choices made, but I more attribute that to the overall direction. The animation style, despite being a bit nostalgic, I think for a lot of us with its similarities to shows like Justice League, it was good. I wouldn't say it was bad by any means. I think it absolutely conveyed the story well, but I've seen some people say this is a top tier animation as well, up there with the best of the best, and I have to push back on that a little bit. I think it's good. quite good. And now, while I give people a moment to leave before we get into the full-on spoilers section, I would just like to ask, how do you like the curtain being at like the total edge of the shot? I think it adds like an implication of cozy. That's kind of nice. I also think we need something down here to like more fill out the space. Any feedback on the new shelf and studio setup would be appreciated. I also think we've cut down the amount of neon a little bit, which is good, although I don't know if it being directly behind my head is the right choice. Let me know. Any and all feedback is like genuinely really welcome. The first thing I want to talk about for spoilers is actually going to be Ellen. I love her. She's amazing.
I will fuck you up!
And like the bit of change and arc and growth we saw from her being kind of an inverse of Maddie, her daughter, where at first she is utterly rejecting uploaded intelligence, wants nothing to do with the version of it from her dead husband.
You're lying.
Maddie, look at me. Your father is not alive.
But by the end of it, she's uploaded her intelligence and is the one who's telling Maddie, like, you should do it too.
Maddie, it's not forever. I still have a choice once I'm there.
Suicide.
Or suspension, storage. You can set a random timer.
You have a random timer now. It's called natural death.
And it's Maddie who's gone from being like all in on the uploaded intelligence, like this is my father, to she doesn't even want to speak, to a resurrected version of her father, possibly like completely disconnected. And of course, at the very end, seeing her being like one of the few things left that resembles humanity amongst this infinitely created universe around a star.
This is pretty damn cool. You built a universe.
Every engineer needs their toolkit.
I assume you've heard this before, and who knows how many times, but I'm sure I meant it, each and every one of them. I'm proud of you, kiddo.
Thanks.
Okay, and I've done some looking into a couple more negative reviews, and I'm an asshole, so I want to speak against a few of the points I saw them bringing up, where people were saying it felt unnecessary or unbelievable how quickly technology just ramps up at the end. But this is literally foreshadowed throughout the show structurally. Well, they're talking about how technology will ramp in its improvement, and it's even happening aggressively in the second season. In my opinion, it works because they're telling you well before it happens that yes, these jumps that are going to result in a Dyson sphere that is simulating a bunch of different universes where Maddie is in charge of it, and it's also within a universe that is being looked over by these supreme beings, and that is how Cassian was able to tell her they would be reunited after all this time. Like, to me, I get, it's like, whoa, but it is justified. I loved it. Taking something that high concept and making it about like special memories and moments on the human level worked so fucking well and was earned. Oh, just spectacular. And I think many of us, I mean, it's a common thing to be partial to like father-daughter, mother-son, mother-daughter, father-son stories. Like we all have parental issues and or bonds, and so narratives can play with that. But it didn't ever feel like, in fact, I want to say this carefully. It didn't ever feel like they were taking cheap shots at family trauma or something along those lines in Pantheon. And instead, it was telling us familiar emotional experiences we probably have had with mothers and fathers, like losing one or something along those lines, and playing them, weaving them into the story in a much more natural, earned way. And I want to commend that even for Caspian's parental abuse arc, where, yeah, parental abuse to each other and towards a child is a common thing. We as a society are kind of abusive, unfortunately. But the fact that that turns into our first window into this corporate cult and is in fact utilized to show us the extreme levels that these corporations are willing to go to, not only on like the planning level, but like the moral depravity, means it is both something that informs our character and the wider story. And so it feels just flawlessly integrated, not exploitative. That's really what I'm just trying to say. Speaking of like that corporate level, oh my God, I certainly didn't expect to see tech bro Steve Jobs Omni-Man versus the Justice League fights climax happening here, but it turned into like one of the coolest animation fights I've seen in quite some time. The real, like, you could always say you can push it further, right? Because a lot of this like action we're seeing of like superhero level is kind of metaphorical for like the computers trying to shut each other down, which it did verge into goofy sometimes, but never in a horrible pull me out of it way. And I like that we clearly see these UIs are based in our minds, use our limited imagination, so it kind of ends up making sense to see this.
Yours was always a borrowed dream, Vinod. A pity you couldn't remember that.
But there's even like a profound emotional character moment where Caspian ends up absorbing the man he was cloned from. And that also ties into the wider themes around generational change, growth, becoming UI. And it's one of those shows where like every layer of the storytelling ties into what's above it and transitions to what's below it, down to the point where you're just feeling the raw instinctual reaction to stuff on screen. But every pivot you also start thinking about and seeing why it happened. And then you can take it even further to the macro level of the broader painting, the tapestry the show is putting together. It's seamless top to bottom.
I am so good at this.
I would say one of the few things that felt a little weaker was like the terrorist subplot line in season 2, which I had to watch at 720p, which was... Green Daniel had to watch at 720p, which was disappointing for him, but it's still believable, right? Like that there would be a terroristic responses, whether it's religious or ideological or moral complaints to a vast majority of society being uploaded into servers and just other people who don't want to do it for whatever reason left behind, which is my favorite like turning point for Maddie as a character. Like, I think it's so interesting that we see her telling her child not to be taken off into this, and that she's against it, and it's believable for her. We've seen this completed arc, but when Caspian returns, things seem to change.
I know how slow I seem to you. And that delegation Mom's part of, they know they're extinct. They're fossils. And they're angry about it.
And you could claim that, like, Maddie has figured it all out, but I don't think the show is trying to tell you to be anti-UI just because one of our protagonists is like not wanting to upload themselves. And I think instead the commentary around her is more about being ready at the right time. Because again, I don't think Pantheon is ever trying to objectively say that uploaded intelligence is good or bad. It is trying to emphasize that we are flawed and that our implementation of it could be good or bad, which is why at the end of the show we see like a good kind of utopia piece accomplished through uploaded intelligence. And that ties into like one of the main questions of season 1 I touched on in the spoiler-free section. Was it right for Lori to upload and release a message informing the world to what is going on? We can all make claims of like, yes, transparency, good, but would you actually want the world to be made aware of when the Manhattan Project was going on? Then the whole history looks different. And I'm not saying one way or the other, but in context, like it's always very easy to point at fiction and go, this is the right answer, release it. But there are wider implications. I really felt challenged by how it was presented here in the story, and the fact that it's not released right away and instead gets released as a decision by David while he is losing, I think adds more questions to it. But we see the results of it coming out in season 2, and the world is in a different place. The hard times before, the harder times before we get to the possible good times, which is to say there is a whole other interpretation of this ending you could make a case for, because we do know it is not you in your UI, right? That is not actually your soul. Or is it? Like, it's not you in at least the sense of the version of David that Maddie bonds with as a UI ends up dying and losing those memories. And so if it's brought back again, yeah, she's essentially signing up to possibly lose her father for a third time. And then she does end up losing her boyfriend in uploaded intelligence, and watch him die twice. Maddie goes through the worst. Getting back to the point, I'm just trying to make the case that the ending of this show, I feel, is a bit more gray than many reactions I've seen online may indicate. There isn't a definitive, this is the best outcome. It certainly seems that the path that was set on that the show indicated was achieved in not the worst way, but at the same time, the music is somewhat ominous, and the inflections we're getting in Maddie's voice are so detached compared to the girl we knew at the start, who is so full of life and energy. Is this even the same character? Is this truly a conclusion, or did she die, well, at this point, like 100,000 years ago? A lot of that is left nebulous to deliberate great effect. But bringing it all back down to just a concluding thoughts, Personally, for me, Pantheon's going to be like a solid 9 out of 10. It's not in my top 10 TV shows of all time, period, but it's probably in my top 5 science fiction shows of all time. Definitely worth your time. Really engaging on an intellectual and emotional level. A showcasing of how animation can still convey an adult drama, an adult story, and even be to the benefit of the narrative overall. And I will be putting on my must-watch list for science fiction fans, specifically those that like really near to real-world science fiction. But this has just been your latest review here on the channel. Let me know what you think of Pantheon in the comments down below. Please leave any spoiler discussion clearly marked with spoilers above it. Journey before destination. Let's not ruin the journey for people before they get to the destination. There are stories I think you can be spoiled for going in and it not make a huge difference. Some of the real twists and turns here, I think enhance the story of Pantheon, experience of it, to put it more smoothly. Like and subscribe if you have not already. Hit the Patreon if you want to support what I do here. And vote on what I'm going to read next after the Dandelion Dynasty. And have a good one, y'all. Peace.